Usually, when we talk about getting a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it's very binary.
Right. It's like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, there it is, broken or not broken.
Yeah, the diagnostic landscape is clean. It's comforting in a way.
Exactly. We inherently like things to be visible and easily categorized, but then you step into the world of building a business from absolute zero.
And the x-ray machine is just totally shattered.
Completely shattered. You're operating in a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky. You might look at your daily activities, the emails you're sending, the meetings you're taking, and think you are growing. But, are you really?
Yeah, and that murkiness is exactly where the majority of fatal business errors occur. People, they mistake a flurry of activity for actual progress.
Yes, which brings us to the core dilemma we're unpacking today. And just to set the stage for you listening, today's deep dive is sourced from a staggeringly detailed masterclass blueprint.
It really is massive.
It is. It's on the architecture of scale, featuring the frameworks of Dr. Shishir Gupta and the Global Startup Lanes ecosystem, which, by the way, is a network spanning 56 cities and 15 countries that has facilitated over $111 million in funding.
So, yeah, they've seen a few things.
To say the least. And the central dilemma they highlight is this. Most entrepreneurs crash and burn simply because they mistake movement for momentum.
Right.
They rush into these highly expensive, highly complex scaling phases long before they've actually established the fundamental viability of their business. They think they're running a marathon, but they're just, sprinting on a treadmill.
And it's not just a matter of working harder either. I mean, it's a foundational misunderstanding of what they are actually trying to build.
Wait, how do you mean?
Well, before anyone even thinks about incorporating a company or writing a line of code, we have to draw a brutally sharp line between a traditional business person and an entrepreneur.
Oh, because we use those interchangeably all the time.
Constantly. In everyday conversation, they mean the same thing, but mechanically. They are entirely different species operating in completely different universes of risk.
I think that's a trap a lot of us fall into, honestly. Like if you open a coffee shop, you're an entrepreneur, right?
Oh.
But this framework suggests otherwise.
Exactly. A traditional business operator is someone who optimizes known cash flows in predictable markets.
Okay.
So let's take your coffee shop example, or maybe someone opening a franchise restaurant in a busy neighborhood. The market demand for coffee or burgers in that zip code is a known variable.
Right. People drink coffee. We know this.
We know it for a fact.
Yeah.
The product is established. The supply chain, like where you buy your cups, your beans, your industrial ovens, it's all completely documented.
It's basically a checklist.
Exactly. Your primary goal is to manage steady commercial operations. You are executing a known playbook to optimize an existing trade model.
Right. So you know exactly how many lattes you need to sell to cover the lease and keep the lights on. I mean, it's hard work, absolutely. But the mechanics of the business are not a mystery.
Not at all. But an entrepreneur, conversely, is operating in environments of extreme and, sometimes paralyzing uncertainty.
Because there is no playbook.
Right. They aren't executing a known playbook. They are trying to invent the playbook while the game is already being played.
Wow.
They are creating entirely new markets or introducing disruptive products where consumer behavior is totally unproven. The goal isn't merely to manage steady cash flow. The goal is to build automated, highly scalable systems designed for exponential growth.
So how does the framework actually define a startup then?
A startup, by its strictest definition here, is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model under conditions of extreme uncertainty.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you are that entrepreneur and you're wandering through a landscape of extreme uncertainty looking for an unproven model, you desperately need a map.
Oh, you absolutely have to have one.
You need a sequence of operations to ensure you don't just walk off a cliff.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the core of our journey today, this meticulously structured 100-step master checklist of the startup lifecycle.
And it isn't just a list of helpful tips. It's an operational sequence that demands absolute respect.
Because if you try to build the penthouse before you've poured the concrete foundation, the entire skyscraper collapses.
It's a structural imperative. And to make this incredibly complex sequence tangible, Dr. Gupta uses this biological analogy that I just think is brilliant.
Yeah, I love this part.
Right. He maps the corporate evolution of a high-growth venture directly to the biological reality of the human life cycle. A startup goes through distinct developmental phases: infancy, toddlerhood, adolescence, adulthood. And the rule is you cannot cheat biology.
I really want to dig into that biological parallel before we hit the actual steps, because it grounds all that abstract Silicon Valley jargon into something we all instinctively understand.
It makes it real.
Yeah. So when a startup is first conceived, what they call the idea phase, it is essentially an infant.
Right, think about a newborn baby. It represents pure biological potential, but it possesses absolutely zero self-sustainability.
None.
It cannot feed itself, it can't protect itself or navigate the world. It is entirely 100% dependent on external care, its parents, just to survive the night.
So in this scenario, the founders are the parents, right?
Mhm.
And their savings, their sweat equity, their time, that's the life support system keeping the infant alive.
Precisely. At this stage, the venture only exists as a flash of insight. Maybe it's some sketches on a whiteboard or a slide deck.
But there's no money coming in.
Zero revenue. There is no functional product. If the founders stop working for even a week, the startup just dies. It is the absolute most vulnerable phase of existence.
And then, assuming it survives infancy, it enters toddlerhood, which maps to the validation phase of the business.
Toddlerhood.
Right. And anyone who has spent time around a toddler knows it's a chaotic period of relentless boundary testing. They are learning to walk, grabbing things they shouldn't, falling down constantly, and just figuring out how they fit into their physical environment.
The falling down is actually the most important part there. Toddlers learn through tactile trial and error.
Right?
For a startup, the validation phase is exactly that. You are testing your core hypotheses against the harsh reality of the market. You're building cheap prototypes and conducting customer interviews, trying to figure out if anyone actually cares about the problem you are solving.
But you're going to get it wrong a lot.
Oh, you will fall down repeatedly. You will launch a feature that users completely ignore. That is just the natural biological rhythm of toddlerhood.
Which makes the central mistake most founders make so incredibly obvious when framed this way. Trying to force exponential expansion before validating product market fit, before the market has proven they even want what you have, is literally like expecting a toddler to run a competitive marathon.
It's not just a bad strategy, it is biologically impossible.
Right. The toddler's bones will break. The business will implode under the weight of its own unearned scale.
And yet we see this exact implosion happen every single day.
Okay, this is exactly where I want to push back, or at least play devil's advocate for a second,
Yeah.
because it just boggles my mind.
Go for it.
You look at the startup ecosystem,
Right.
and it's not just like naive kids dropping out of college who make this mistake. You see incredibly smart, seasoned corporate veterans people with MBAs from elite institutions. Executives who have managed $100 million divisional budgets at Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, the heavy hitter.
Exactly. They leave the corporate safety net to start a company, and they walk right into this trap of premature scaling. If this biological sequence is so logically sound, why do the seasoned experts continually get it wrong?
Because the instincts that make you successful in a Fortune 500 company are often the exact instincts that will kill a startup.
Wow.
Yeah, this gets to the heart of what the framework calls the delusion of vanity metrics. In a mature corporate environment, you are basically trained to look at specific indicators of steady-state growth.
Like what?
Like how many people are in your department?
Yeah.
Or the square footage of your office? Your PR mentions or raw website traffic? In a mature business, those numbers mean you are winning.
But in a startup, those same numbers are a mirage.
Worse than a mirage, they are a total distraction. They make you feel like you have momentum, when in reality, you just have movement.
Going back to that core dilemma.
Right. You hire a VP of sales and run a beautiful glass office downtown, and you feel like a real CEO. You take a photo of your new team and put it on LinkedIn.
Getting all those likes?
Exactly, getting likes. But you haven't actually proven that your product solves a real problem for a real customer who is willing to pay for it.
So you're basically putting a toddler in a three-piece suit and calling him an executive. It's cosplay.
It is corporate cosplay. Dr. Gupta introduces a psychological concept here that founders absolutely must internalize: the internal locus of control.
What does that mean in this context?
Well, when you come from the corporate world, you are highly sensitive to external validation. You want to look successful to your former peers. You want to look successful to unsophisticated early investors who are asking, why you haven't launched a massive marketing campaign yet.
So you feel this pressure to speed things up.
Exactly. If you lack an internal locus of control, you let those external pressures dictate your operational pacing. You skip toddlerhood because toddlerhood is messy and embarrassing, and you jump straight to adulthood.
And the penalty for that is catastrophic. The framework contains a quote that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. It says, "Premature scaling is corporate suicide. Do not pour rocket fuel on a bicycle tire."
It's a violent image, honestly, but an accurate one.
It really is.
If you pour high-octane rocket fuel on a fragile, unproven system like a bicycle tire, it doesn't make the bicycle go to the moon. It just blows the tire to pieces.
Because it can't handle the energy.
Right. Capital and scale accelerate whatever direction you're already heading. If your foundational mechanics are broken, scale will just accelerate your failure.
Okay, so how do we avoid blowing up the bicycle tire? How do we respect the sequence? If we step away from the abstract and dive right into the physical blueprint, the first 20 steps of this massive 100-step checklist deal entirely with conception and foundation.
It's about bringing the idea into the world and surrounding it with legal and operational armor.
But even here, right at the starting line, the traps are everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. The very first instruction in this architecture isn't about brainstorming a cool product. It's about identifying a persistent, painful problem.
Which is counterintuitive for a lot of people.
It is. A lot of engineers make the mistake of building a beautiful piece of technology and then wandering around the market trying to find a problem that fits their solution.
A solution looking for a problem.
Exactly. This framework demands the opposite. You start with a friction point in your daily life or your industry, and you interrogate that pain.
And you interrogate it by talking to people. Which brings us to the mechanics of early market sizing. A lot of listeners have probably heard the acronyms TAM, SAM, and SOM thrown around in pitch meetings or on shows like Shark Tank.
Oh, constantly.
The checklist mandates calculating these before you write a single line of code. But let's actually explain what these mean in reality. Because they sound like dry accounting terms, but they really dictate whether your business is worth pursuing at all.
They completely dictate your ceiling. Let's use a very grounded example to explain it. Let's say you want to build a subscription delivery service for specialized, organic, gluten-free dog food.
Okay, I like it.
Your TAM is your total addressable market. This is the absolute maximum universe of revenue if every single person who could possibly buy your product did so.
So your TAM is literally every single dog owner on planet Earth who buys dog food.
Exactly. It's a massive number, probably in the tens of billions of dollars.
Right. And when a founder goes to an investor and says, our market is $50 billion, the investor just rolls their eyes because you aren't capturing every dog owner on Earth.
Not a chance. Which is why you have to calculate your SAM, your serviceable available market.
Okay, so what does that narrow down?
This restricts the TAM by your actual business model and geographic limitations. Your subscription dog food relies on fresh, refrigerated logistics. You can't ship fresh food to Tokyo from your kitchen in Chicago.
That would be a logistical nightmare.
It would ruin the food. So your SAM might just be dog owners in North America who specifically buy premium or organic pet food. Suddenly, that $50 billion number shrinks down to, say, $2 billion.
Which is still a big number. Still looks great on a spreadsheet.
It does, but it's still an illusion for a day one startup. The most critical metric for a new founder is the SOM, the serviceable obtainable market. Right. This is the highly realistic short-term slice of the SAM that you can actually capture with your current extremely limited resources, your current 3-person team, and your absolute lack of brand awareness.
So bringing you back to the dog food.
Your SAM might literally be premium dog owners in a 50-mile radius of Chicago who are actively looking for gluten-free options. That market might only be worth $5 million.
Wow. So why go through this depressing mathematical exercise of shrinking your dreams down from 50 billion to 5 million?
Because the graph tells you if you can survive infancy. If your SAM is only worth $50,000, the market is just too small to support a venture scale business. You will starve before you ever reach toddlerhood.
I see.
Calculating TAM, SAM, and SOM isn't really about pitching investors. It's about proving to yourself that the gravitational pull of the market is strong enough to justify dedicating the next 10 years of your life to this problem.
That makes total sense. And if the math checks out, the framework points us to step 10, which sounds deceptively simple, but is actually the graveyard of visionaries.
Oh, this one is tough.
Step 10 is commit to a single validated problem space. Why is it physically painful for an entrepreneur to do this?
Because the defining psychological trait of an entrepreneur is opportunity recognition. They just see potential optimizations everywhere they look.
It's how their brains are wired.
Exactly. So they start out wanting to fix the dog food supply chain, but while they are researching logistics, they realize the software used by delivery truck drivers is terribly outdated.
Uh-oh. I see where this is going.
Right. So they think, well, maybe we should build a software tool for local logistics, and we can also use it for our dog food, and maybe we can license it out to other companies, and oh, we can integrate an AI chatbot for customer service.
That is massive scope creep before the company even exists.
Huge scope creep. Michael Dell has a rule that is heavily referenced in these circles. Ideas are a commodity, execution of them is not. Everyone has ideas. Ideas are cheap, they're frictionless, and they're safe. But execution is brutally difficult. It requires ruthless, singular focus. If you do not commit to a single problem space, you dilute your incredibly scarce resources, your time, your cognitive energy, your limited cash across 5 different ideas.
So you end up building 5 terrible prototypes instead of one effective solution.
Exactly. You remain trapped in the idea phase forever, just paralyzed by your own imagination.
Okay, so you lock yourself in a room, you stare at the wall, and you commit to one single problem. You are going to build a fresh dog food delivery service.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. The next major hurdle steps, 11 through 20, is about who is in that room with you. Team formation and legal foundation. The framework is adamant that you cannot do this alone, and it identifies 3 specific archetypes you need to form the genetic nucleus of a startup: the builder, the rainmaker, and the operator.
You need complementary, non-overlapping skill sets. Let's break down the molecular structure here.
Let's do it.
The builder is your technical co-founder. If you are building a tech platform, this is your software architect. They own the engineering. The reason you need a builder as a co-founder with equity, rather than just hiring an outsourced dev shop, is because the product is going to change 50 times in the first year.
And if you have to pay an agency $50 an hour every time you want to move a button or change a feature based on user feedback, you will run out of money in a month.
Exactly. The builder allows you to iterate for free, but a builder alone will build a beautifully engineered product in a vacuum that nobody wants.
Right, because they aren't talking to the customers.
Which is why you need the rainmaker. This is the commercial co-founder.
Yeah.
Their domain is the go-to-market strategy, customer acquisition, and eventually investor pitching. They are the evangelists.
So they are out in the street selling the vision of the product before the builder has even finished writing the code.
They generate the oxygen, the revenue, or the investment that allows the builder to keep building. And then there is the third pillar, the operator.
And what do?
The operator bridges the massive translation gap between the technical reality of the builder and the market promises made by the rainmaker.
Keeping everyone grounded.
Right. The operator owns the day-to-day execution, the user experience, the project management. They make sure the trains actually run on time. If you have 2 builders and no rainmaker, you basically have a science project.
And if you have 2 rainmakers and no builder?
Then you have a slick pitch deck and a lot of hype, but zero substance. You need that balanced molecular triad to survive.
Now, bringing these 3 distinct personalities together is fraught with risk. We've all heard the horror stories of best friends starting a company in a garage, and 3 years later they are suing each other into oblivion.
It happens all the time.
Step 13 of the checklist provides the specific legal armor required to prevent this. It mandates a comprehensive co-founder agreement with a multi-year vesting schedule. Can you explain the actual mechanics of a vesting schedule? Because if you're listening to this on a commute right now, thinking about starting a business with your college roommate, you really need to understand how this protects you.
It is arguably the most important legal document you will ever sign. Let's invent a highly specific, very common disaster scenario.
Okay.
You, Alice, and Bob decide to start a company. On day 1, you incorporate and you split the equity evenly, 33% each.
Makes sense.
A month goes by. It's hard work, no one is getting paid, and Bob gets an offer for a safe, comfortable corporate job with health insurance. Bob leaves.
Well, good for Bob. But now I have a problem.
You have a catastrophic problem. If you didn't have a vesting schedule, Bob just walked away with 33% of your company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You and Alice are going to spend the next 5 years working 80-hour weeks, pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into building the value of this business. And Bob, who is sitting on a beach somewhere enjoying his corporate salary, gets to keep a third of everything you build.
And more importantly, if you and Alice try to raise money from an investor later, the investor will look at that ownership structure, what they call a messy cap table, and they will walk away immediately, right?
100%. Investors call that dead equity. They will not invest their fresh capital if a third of the value is instantly absorbed by someone who isn't contributing to the company's daily survival.
So how does a vesting schedule fix this?
A vesting schedule prevents this mechanically. It states that you don't get your 33% on day one. You earn it over time, typically a 4-year period, with a 1-year cliff.
Meaning, if Bob leaves in month 11, he walks away with 0%. He didn't hit the cliff.
Exactly. If he leaves after 2 years, he keeps half of his allotted equity, which is fair because he contributed for 2 years. But the unvested portion goes back to the company. Vesting schedules, along with IP assignment agreements, which legally mandate that the company, not the individual, owns any code or designs created, are just non-negotiable.
And Dr. Gupta emphasizes that these aren't just legal chores. They are the foundation of institutional maturity. If your legal foundation is made of sand, no investor will ever build a skyscraper on top of it.
Never.
And speaking of the team, this section of the blueprint includes a very stark hiring rule. For phase 1 and 2, the optimal number of employees you should hire is 0.
0 employees. You only have the co-founders.
Why? I mean, if you have a little bit of savings, wouldn't it be faster to hire an assistant or a junior developer to help out?
Because at this stage, you don't even know what the company is yet. The business model is entirely unproven. You might pivot 3 times next month. Employees require structure. They require a predictable salary, benefits, and clearly defined daily tasks. You cannot provide any of that. You need co-founders who have an extreme tolerance for ambiguity, who are willing to take equity instead of cash, and who can wake up on a Tuesday, realize the entire product architecture is wrong, and throw it in the trash without demanding severance.
That brings us right to the precipice of the most dangerous phase.
Yeah.
You have the idea, you have the builder, the rainmaker, the operator. The legal armor is ironclad. Your cap table is clean. Now, you have to leave the safety of the whiteboard and actually interact with the physical world.
Yep. Toddlerhood.
You enter toddlerhood, phase 3. Validation and product prototyping.
This is where theoretical enthusiasm crashes headfirst into harsh market reality.
And this section features what I think is the most brutal and most necessary quote in the entire text from Dr. Gupta. He states, "Validation is the graveyard of assumptions. Never build a monument to an unverified idea."
Never build a monument to an unverified idea. I mean, if every founder internalized that one sentence, the failure rate of startups would drop by 50% overnight.
It is a profound warning against human ego. Steps 21 through 30 dictate the tactical execution of this phase. You aren't building a polished, flawless application. You are building low-fidelity wireframes, testing them with target users to gather friction feedback, designing simple landing pages, and defining the absolute minimal feature set required for your MVP, your minimum viable product.
And we really need to dissect the word minimum there. The goal of an MVP is not to impress anyone.
Right.
The goal is to eliminate uncertainty as cheaply and as quickly as humanly possible. It is a scientific experiment designed to test a hypothesis, not a product designed to generate profit.
To really illustrate how this works mechanically, the source material leans into some legendary case studies. Let's talk about Dropbox. Today, Dropbox is a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure giant. But the back-end technology required to make files seamlessly sync across a Mac, a PC, and a phone back in 2007 was incomprehensibly difficult to build. It was going to take years of complex engineering. So how do they validate the demand before they spent millions of dollars building the monument?
They faked it.
They faked it.
They completely faked it. They didn't write the production code for the complex back-end syncing. Instead, the founder, Drew Houston, created a simple 3-minute explainer video. He mocked up how the technology would look and feel if it were already built.
Oh, that's smart.
He narrated a screen recording showing files magically appearing on different devices. It was just a demonstration of a concept.
Yep.
He posted that video to a niche community of tech early adopters, Hacker News.
And the result was immediate.
Their beta waiting list exploded overnight, from a few thousand to over 75,000 people. With a 3-minute video, they acquired empirical, undeniable proof of massive consumer intent.
Wow.
They validated the problem space completely before they committed the heavy resources required to actually engineer the solution.
They proved the market wanted the medicine before they built the pharmaceutical plant. Let's look at another one. Zappos.
Oh, this is a great one.
The idea of buying shoes online seems completely obvious to us today. But in 1999, the conventional wisdom was that buying shoes required physical interaction. You had to go to the mall, measure your foot, try them on.
How did founder Nick Swinmurn prove otherwise?
If Nick Swinburne acted like a traditional business person, he would have assumed he needed to build a massive warehouse, negotiate wholesale contracts with Nike and Adidas, and buy millions of dollars in inventory just to open his virtual doors.
Which is a huge financial risk.
And if he had done that, and the conventional wisdom was right, he would have gone bankrupt instantly.
So what did he actually do?
He executed a perfectly constrained MVP. He went to local shoe stores in his town, took photos of the shoes on the shelves, and built a rudimentary website displaying those photos.
Like just photos from a store? Yep. And when a customer visited the site and clicked buy, Swinburne didn't have a warehouse to pull from. He physically walked back to the local shoe store, bought the exact pair of shoes at full retail price, put them in a box, and shipped them to the customer via the post office.
He was literally losing money on every single transaction.
Exactly. And that is the brilliance of it. He wasn't trying to build a profitable unit economic model in week one. He was acting as a human API, manually faking the automated back end of an e-commerce giant.
So he was paying a small premium, the retail markup, to validate a foundational behavioral assumption. Will human beings put their credit card into a website to buy shoes without trying them on?
Right. And once he had enough transactions to prove that the answer was yes, he had the empirical data required to go raise capital and actually build the warehouses.
He survived the graveyard of assumptions. And then there is Buffer, a tool for scheduling social media posts. How did they validate?
Buffer used what is called a fake door test. They put up a simple landing page explaining what their scheduling tool would do. At the bottom of the page, they had a plans and pricing button.
But the product didn't exist yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when users clicked that button, they weren't taken to a checkout page. They were taken to a page that said, "Hello, you caught us before we are ready. Leave your email and we'll let you know when we launch."
Which sounds frustrating for the user, but what did it actually do for the founder?
It provided quantitative behavioral data. What's fascinating here is they tracked exactly how many people read the value proposition and then clicked the button indicating they were willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
They weren't just asking people, "Hey, would you use this?" They were measuring actual intent to purchase.
And that distinction is critical. Because if you just ask your friends or industry peers if your idea is good, they will almost always lie to you,
They always lie.
right? They will say, yeah, that sounds great, because they want to be polite or they want to support you. But polite feedback is lethal. The only truth in business is a transaction. A credit card swipe or an email submission indicating high intent tells the cold, hard truth.
This methodology connects directly to Steve Blank's customer development framework, which is a cornerstone of this masterclass text. Blank's entire philosophy is that startups are not smaller versions of large companies. You cannot write a business plan for an unknown market.
Right.
You have to articulate your hypotheses on a canvas, get out of the building, and test them directly with target users. You gather data to either pivot your idea or persevere.
And it aligns with Eric Ries's lean startup methodology as well. Build, measure, learn. You build the MVP, you measure the actionable behavioral metrics, and you learn from the data. You do not rely on the vanity metrics we discussed earlier.
You embrace the toddlerhood of the business. You fall down, you scrape your knee, you realize your initial assumption was totally wrong, and you celebrate that failure.
Why would you celebrate being wrong?
Because if your assumption dies early in the graveyard of validation, you just saved yourself 3 years of your life and $2 million in venture capital building a monument to an idea that no one actually wanted.
That's a great point.
You protected your decision capital. You cleared the deck so you can find an idea that actually has a pulse.
Okay, so let's assume you survived the graveyard. The market has spoken. Your MVP landing page is getting massive traction. People are using your clunky prototype. The toddler has finally learned to walk. Now, how do you actually make money without killing yourself in the process?
That's a $1 million question.
We are moving into phases 4 and 5, launch, early traction, and commercialization, the transition into adolescence.
This is the metamorphosis. This is where the dream transforms into a machine.
Steps 31 through 40 focus on organic onboarding and early traction. You are refining the product based on all those early bug reports. But the absolute mandate here is obsessively tracking user retention. You are looking for leaky buckets in your funnel. Let's explain the leaky bucket concept, because it completely changes how you view marketing.
Imagine your product is a bucket, and your marketing budget is water. A lot of founders, the moment they get early validation, immediately want to pour water into the bucket.
They want to scale.
Right. They want to buy Facebook ads, hire a PR firm, drive thousands of users to their app. But if your product is fundamentally flawed, if the user interface is confusing or the app crashes or the core value isn't delivered quickly, your bucket has massive holes in the bottom.
So you spend $10,000 to acquire 1,000 users on Monday, and by Thursday, 900 of them have uninstalled the app.
Exactly. You don't have a growth problem in that scenario. You have a retention problem. The framework insists that you must fix the core product loops. You must plug the holes in the bucket before you pour expensive marketing capital into it. You have to ensure that when a user arrives, they experience an aha moment quickly and they stick around.
Once the holes are plugged, we hit the crucible. Commercialization, steps 41 through 50. The text outlines 5 concrete, non-negotiable steps to commercialize your venture. First, you have to define the core revenue mechanism. Are you a SaaS monthly subscription? Are you a freemium model where 90% play for free and 10% pay for premium features? Are you taking a transactional fee on a marketplace? You have to choose how value is captured.
Second, you must begin to optimize your customer acquisition cost, or CAC. Your acquisition channels can't just be you individually hustling at networking events anymore.
Because that doesn't scale.
Right. They must become measurable and cost-effective digital or scalable physical channels.
Which leads directly into the third step, establishing repeatable sales loops. We talked about the Rainmaker earlier, the charismatic co-founder closing early deals. Why does the framework insist that this has to stop during commercialization?
Because founder-led sales do not scale. A founder closing a deal relies on their deep passion, their encyclopedic knowledge of the vision, and their ability to bend reality through sheer willpower.
And you can't hire that.
You cannot clone the founder. To commercialize, you need a predictable mechanical sales process. You need a script and a system so that a 24-year-old junior sales rep who was hired last week can predictably convert a lead into a paying customer. The system has to work when the founders are asleep.
Fourth, you must achieve gross margin viability. We need to break this down. If you are selling software or dog food, it must cost you significantly less to deliver the product than what the customer is actually paying you.
This sounds painfully obvious, but it is the #1 killer of hypergrowth startups. If it costs you $1.10 to manufacture, ship, and support a product that you are selling for $1, you have negative unit economics.
You are literally subsidizing your customer's life.
Exactly. Now, you might grow incredibly fast because everyone loves buying $1 for 90 cents. Your vanity metrics will go through the roof.
But, as Dr. Gupta explicitly notes, if your unit economics bleed, your scale will only accelerate your bankruptcy. You will just die faster and more spectacularly.
The fifth step is securing initial reference customers. You need those early, highly satisfied users to provide case studies and testimonials, which builds the trust required to lower the acquisition cost for the next wave of buyers.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Dr. Gupta provides a philosophical lens for this entire exhausting process of commercialization. He says, a job feeds you for a month, but binds your leverage to a desk. A business starves you for a season, but builds an automated engine that feeds your generations forever. Stop selling the seed. Start planting the orchard.
Stop selling the seed, start planting the orchard. It is a profound psychological pivot regarding how an individual values their own labor. When you are an employee at a traditional job, you are trading hours for dollars. You are bound to time-based compensation.
If you don't show up to the desk, you don't get paid.
Right. You are selling the seed of your daily energy.
But when you are building this commercial engine, the dynamic flips entirely.
You are starving for a season. You are working 80-hour weeks in this commercialization phase, likely paying yourself minimum wage or nothing at all, dealing with immense stress. But the labor you are exerting isn't evaporating at the end of the day.
It's building the machine.
It is accumulating into an asset, an automated software platform, a repeatable sales funnel, a documented operational procedure. You are planting an orchard that will eventually bear fruit independently of your physical presence.
To understand what that orchard looks like in reality, the source material dissects how some of the most prominent companies navigated this specific transition. Slack is a perfect example of turning chaos into a disciplined engine.
Slack's origin story is incredible. It didn't start as a B2B productivity tool. It started as an internal communication glitch within a video game company called Tiny Speck.
A video game company?
Yeah. The game they were building, called Glitch, was fundamentally failing in the market. But the founders noticed something fascinating. The quirky internal chat tool they had hacked together to coordinate their remote developers was incredibly sticky. Their team loved using it.
So they abandoned the video game entirely.
They killed the game, stripped the chat tool down to its core components, and pivoted. But the pivot alone wasn't the commercialization. They applied rigorous, disciplined sauce mechanics to it. They instituted a freemium model where small teams could use it for free, but once they became dependent on the archive history, they had to pay a per-user fee. They transformed an internal utility into a highly monetized, automated commercial engine.
And what about Calendly? Because Calendly solved the exact problem we just discussed regarding customer acquisition cost, and they did it brilliantly.
Calendly achieved commercial self-sustainability by engineering virality directly into the product itself. They utilized embedded user signature loops.
How does that work?
Think about how Calendly works. You sign up and you send a link to someone else so they can schedule a meeting on your calendar. When the recipient clicks the link, they experience a seamless, friction-free scheduling process. They instantly recognize the value. And right there on the page, there is a prompt to create their own Calendly account.
The user is doing the marketing for the company just by using the product natively.
Exactly. Every single time a user utilized the product, it acted as a targeted advertisement to a new potential user. This product-led growth loop drove their customer acquisition costs down to near zero. Because they didn't have to spend massive amounts on Facebook ads or a huge outbound sales team, they achieved gross margin viability incredibly quickly. The engine ran itself.
But building this engine, transitioning from the hustle of validation to the mechanics of commercialization, is notoriously painful. The text highlights that adolescence is often where startups fracture internally. Why is this specific transition so psychologically difficult for founders?
Because the founders have to fire themselves from the jobs they were previously doing.
Oh, that makes sense.
During validation, agility, chaotic energy, and sheer founder willpower keep the company alive. You are doing everything. Coding, answering customer support emails at 3 a.m., pitching angels. But during commercialization, you have to transition to standard operating procedures, SOPs. You are moving from the art of the hustle to the cold science of operations. You have to build a system that ordinary people can execute predictably.
And that requires a significant shift in who you are bringing into the room. The hiring rule changes here. You're still not hiring massive teams, you are managing cash burn, but you need a specific blend of talent.
The framework recommends a balanced approach here. You hire multidisciplinary generalists. These are typically high-energy, ambitious junior talent who are hungry to learn, can wear multiple hats, and are relatively affordable.
Right.
But crucially, you must pair them with one or two deeply experienced senior leads. You bring in a veteran head of engineering who has scaled databases before, or a seasoned VP of sales who understands CRM architecture.
Wait, why pay the premium for those veterans now? Why not just hire 10 junior people who will work 90 hours a week for cheaper?
Because junior generalists can execute a playbook, but they don't know how to write one. The founders have never built an automated sales machine. They are just figuring it out through intuition. A seasoned VP of sales brings the institutional playbook with them.
They've done it before.
They write the SOPs, they set up the CRM workflows, they establish the quotas, and they train the junior generalist to execute those workflows flawlessly. The veteran builds the machinery, the generalists operate it.
And once that machinery is humming, you hit what the text refers to as the product market fit engine. This is where we get into the mathematical proof of survival. The framework talks about the transition from pre-PMF, characterized by high churn and erratic founder-led heroics, to the post-PMF state, where you achieve predictable CAC to LTV ratios. Let's demystify this math. CAC to LTV, customer acquisition costs compared to lifetime value.
This ratio is the heartbeat of a commercial business. Let's use our dog food subscription example again. If you spend $10,000 on Instagram ads and you acquire 100 new subscribing customers, your customer acquisition cost, your CAC, is $100 per customer.
Okay, so it costs me $100 to get someone to buy the food.
Now we look at the LTV, the lifetime value. How much gross profit does that specific customer generate for you before they eventually cancel their subscription? If a customer stays subscribed for an average of 10 months and you make $30 in gross profit each month from their order, their lifetime value is $300.
So I spend $100 to acquire $300 in profit over time. A 3-to-1 ratio.
Exactly. A 3-to-1 ratio is generally considered the gold standard for a healthy startup engine. If you have that mathematical proof, you have completed the commercialization phase. The machine works.
But if it doesn't?
If it costs you $100 to acquire the customer and they hate the dog food and cancel after 1 month, your LTV is only $30. You are burning $70 on every customer you acquire. Your engine is broken, and pouring venture capital into that broken engine will destroy the company.
We are 50 steps into the 100-step checklist. The engine is built. It is generating profit mathematically. But before we look at phase 6 and talk about pouring venture capital gasoline into this engine, the masterclass forces us to hit pause. It pivots away from the business entity itself and forces us to look at the physical and geographic reality of the human beings executing this blueprint. Section 5 is about the architecture of time and geography.
Because businesses don't build themselves, People build them, and human energy is a finite resource. The framework aims to shatter the toxic illusion of the overnight success that dominates social media.
Oh yeah, you go on Twitter or LinkedIn, and it seems like some 22-year-old launched an app on Tuesday and sold it to Google on Friday for $1 billion.
It's survivor bias and aggressive PR. The masterclass breaks down the sobering empirical math behind building a venture-scale enterprise. Across the global venture ecosystem, there is a consensus that building a major, enduring company, taking it from step 1 to an IPO or major acquisition, takes roughly 7 to 10 years of relentless, all-consuming dedication.
The text quotes Biz Stone, the co-founder of Twitter, who said, "Timing, perseverance, and 10 years of trying will eventually make you look like an overnight success."
And when you break those 10 years down into literal hours, the physical toll becomes palpable. The framework estimates that a committed founder, driving through the first 3 brutal phases of validation, commercialization, and early scale, is working between 60 to 90 hours per week.
Wow.
If you assume a baseline average of 70 hours a week and you grind that out for 50 weeks a year across 7 years, you are looking at roughly 25,000 hours of high-intensity, active professional effort.
25,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell famously popularized the idea that mastery in any field takes 10,000 hours. This framework suggests that building a scalable startup requires more than double that threshold.
And the intensity of those hours shifts depending on the biological phase of the company. During year 1, the validation phase, you are putting in 60 to 80 hours a week, conducting those manual, unscalable customer interviews, hacking together wireframes, and experiencing massive emotional volatility.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
In years 2 and 3, the commercialization phase, the workload actually peaks at 70 to 90 hours. You're managing early cash flow crises, onboarding the first employees, attempting to document the SOPs we talked about, and fixing the product every time a new user breaks it.
So when does it let up?
It isn't until year 3 or 4, assuming you survive and achieve that PMF engine, that the sheer volume of hours might drop slightly to 50 or 60 hours a week. At that point, you are shifting from doing the tactical grunt work to strategically delegating to your newly hired executive team.
But here is the critical warning Dr. Gupta issues. Working 80-hour weeks is completely meaningless if the hours are misallocated. Grinding away at the wrong tasks doesn't earn you a badge of honor, it just accelerates burnout. This introduces the absolute necessity of auditing your time based on leverage.
Yes, the difference between high leverage hours and low leverage hours.
Break that down for us. What is the founder supposed to be doing with those 25,000 hours?
High leverage hours are activities that compound in value over time and permanently move the structural needle of the business. We are talking about sitting down directly with an enterprise customer to understand a deep friction point in their workflow.
Right.
We are talking about interviewing and recruiting an elite VP of engineering who will multiply the output of your entire technical team. We are talking about refining the core revenue architecture. These actions create compounding downstream effects.
They build the orchard.
Exactly. Low leverage hours, conversely, are the traps of movement disguised as momentum. It's spending 3 hours a day obsessively refreshing your Google Analytics dashboard to look at vanity traffic.
They've all been there.
It's sitting in unstructured 2-hour internal status meetings where no actionable decisions are made. It is the founder personally formatting a PowerPoint presentation or doing basic data entry because they refuse to delegate to a junior employee. If you spend your 80-hour work week on low-leverage tasks, your startup will still fail. You will just be significantly more exhausted when it happens.
You have to be ruthless with your calendar. But time is only one axis of the environmental reality. The framework also dives deeply into geography. This 100-step checklist is presented as universal, but how does the physical location of the founder dictate the friction they will experience? A founder executing this in San Francisco is going to have a very different experience than a founder executing this in a Tier 3 city in India or a traditional market in Europe.
Geography dictates the viscosity of the ecosystem you are swimming in. It impacts capital availability, regulatory compliance burdens, and most importantly, the cultural attitude toward risk. The masterclass details these stark differences to prepare founders for their specific localized reality.
Let's start with the anomaly. Silicon Valley and North American tech hubs.
Silicon Valley is a unique biome. It features incredibly deep, institutionalized pools of venture capital and an unparalleled cultural tolerance for risk.
They just view failure differently,
Right,
right?
completely. Investors there understand and expect high-burn, hyper-growth models aimed at monopolizing a new market rapidly. Crucially, the culture itself destigmatizes failure. A founder can raise $2 million, fail spectacularly, shut the company down gracefully, and raise another $2 million the next year for a new idea. Failure is viewed as a necessary iteration of learning. This encourages massive, disruptive experimentation.
Okay, contrast that with the European startup ecosystem.
Europe is traditionally much more conservative structurally. There is a heavier reliance on government grants, regional economic development funds, and smaller, more risk-averse angel syndicates.
So the money moves differently.
Because you don't have access to massive high-risk growth capital as easily, European startups often are forced to prioritize sustainable unit economics and actual profitability much earlier in their life cycle. They tend to build slightly slower, more methodical companies because the capital environment demands immediate financial discipline.
And what about emerging markets? The framework mentions regions across Southeast Asia, Latin America, and India.
In emerging markets, you see incredible ingenuity, but founders face massive environmental friction. Capital is often highly disciplined and focused on the real economy, digitizing traditional supply chains, agritech, or fintech for the unbanked. But the biggest difference is regulatory friction.
Like red tape.
A lot of red tape. A founder in Delaware or Singapore can incorporate a company, set up a clean cap table, and open a corporate bank account digitally in 48 hours. A founder in a developing market might spend 6 months navigating Byzantine bureaucratic hurdles, complex tax compliance layers, and localized corruption just to establish the legal entity. They burn massive amounts of decision capital just fighting the bureaucracy.
Plus, there's an infrastructure and mentorship gap.
Yeah.
If you are in London, you can get coffee with someone who has scaled a billion-dollar fintech company. If you're in a Tier 3 geography, access to those proven go-to-market playbooks and elite technical talent is scarce.
Which is precisely why this source material places such immense emphasis on the role of global, interconnected ecosystems. It highlights how organizations like Startuplanes are actively bridging these geographic disparities.
By connecting everyone.
By operating across 56 cities and 15 countries and facilitating over $111 million in structured capital, they essentially provide decentralized digital Silicon Valley infrastructure to founders regardless of their zip code.
It democratizes the entire 100-step process. A founder in a regional market gets access to the exact same pitch deck frameworks, the same Tier 1 strategic mentorship, and the same cross-border angel capital networks as someone sitting in San Francisco. It removes the geographic friction so that pure execution can win.
It levels the playing field completely.
All right, we understand the biological timeline. We have a legal foundation. We survived the validation graveyard. We built a mathematically sound profit engine. And we understand our geographic battlefield. We are now entering adulthood, phase 6 and 7, team scaling and fundraising, steps 51 through 70. You have a working engine, but to take over a market, you need a larger crew and you need rocket fuel.
We are definitively moving out of survival mode and entering true scale. This is the expansion phase.
Steps 51 through 60 are entirely focused on team scaling and talent acquisition. But this isn't just about hiring a few more developers. It's about organizational design. It covers the mechanics of writing highly specific job descriptions, building structured behavioral interview loops, and assessing candidates not just for raw technical ability, but for cultural resilience.
As the team grows from a close-knit group of 10 people who all sit in the same room to 50 or 100 people spread across different departments, communication organically breaks down.
You can't just shout across the room anymore.
Right. This aligns perfectly with Reid Hoffman's blitzscaling framework, which maps scale from the family phase to the tribe to the village and eventually the city. When you reach the village phase, you have to build actual departments. You need a dedicated HR function, a formalized product management team, a distinct customer success department.
And you have to foster a culture of psychological safety. The text emphasizes that as you scale, you will inevitably make bad hires. You have to learn how to manage underperformance decisively and gracefully without destroying the morale of the high performers.
But to pay for this massive influx of specialized talent, to fund the salaries of 100 new employees, you need capital. Which brings us to the most mythologized part of the startup journey, steps 61 through 70, fundraising and capital deployment.
The art of the pitch deck. There is so much terrible advice on the internet about how to build a pitch deck. People focus on the graphic design, the colors, the emotional storytelling. But Dr. Gupta has a phenomenal rule here. He says a pitch deck is not a creative writing assignment. It is a mathematical proof of your ability to capture value and return capital.
I love this concept.
So accurate.
It's like being back in high school geometry. You can't just draw a triangle and write, trust me, this angle is 90 degrees. You get an F. You have to submit the theorem and show the structural proof.
Exactly. When you are asking institutional investors for $5 million, emotional storytelling is not enough. You have to show your work. You present the empirical evidence that your engine works. You show them the cohort retention curves from phase 3. You show them the 3-to-1 CAC to LTV ratio from phase 4. You prove that the unit economics are sound. This connects directly to the core axioms of venture capital outlined in the masterclass. The text pulls back the curtain on how institutional money actually thinks. One of the most critical insights is this quote: VCs don't fund ideas. They fund the de-risking of execution.
That paradigm shift changes everything for a founder. When founders pitch, they often think they're asking investors to take a blind leap of faith on a magical dream.
Like they're begging for a favor.
They aren't. Professional investors buy future cash flows that are heavily discounted by execution risk. Your job in the pitch deck is to show how you have systematically murdered the risk during the first 50 steps. You show them that market risk is gone because you validated the MVP. You show them that team risk is gone because you have a vested complementary trio. You show them economic risk is gone because the CAC is predictable.
As the risk goes down, the valuation of your company goes up.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to the gasoline analogy we touched on earlier, but applied specifically to venture capital. Capital is like gasoline. Pouring it on a healthy engine creates rocket fuel. Pouring it on a broken engine creates an explosion.
If your product has a leaky bucket, if users churn out after a month, and you convince a VC to give you $5 million, what happens? You spend that $5 million on a massive marketing campaign. You flood the broken bucket with hundreds of thousands of users.
Handle breaks.
The servers crash, the customer support team gets overwhelmed, all the users leave angry and write terrible reviews, and you burn through $5 million in 6 months with absolutely nothing to show for it. The company explodes.
But if the engine is healthy, that $5 million allows you to buy market share faster than your competitors can react. It becomes rocket fuel. And this is why the framework dictates that specific funding instruments must match the exact maturity milestone of the venture. You do not raise a Series A round when you just have an idea on a napkin. Walk us through the sequencing. How does the capital scale with the biology?
In the conception and validation phases, infancy and toddlerhood, you are in the pre-seed or angel stage. This capital comes from the founder's savings, friends and family, or early angel investors who are betting primarily on the founder's raw grit. This is a small amount of money, just enough to fund the cheap experiments required to survive the graveyard of assumptions.
You just need enough money to buy the shoes from the local store and ship them, like Nick Swinburne.
Right. Once you establish early traction and enter the commercialization phase, you seek seed stage funding. This might be from larger angel syndicates or early-stage micro-VCs. This capital is specifically earmarked for building out the initial core team, hiring those first veteran leads, and mathematically proving the unit economics.
And then you hit the institutional big leagues, the rocket fuel.
Yes. Once the PMF engine is proven and mathematically sound, you enter the growth equity stages. Series A, Series B, and Series C rounds. These are massive injections of capital from major institutional venture capital firms. This money is not for experimenting with new ideas. This money is purely for scaling the proven unit economics, expanding into new geographic distribution channels, and monopolizing market share before competitors can catch up.
The framework shares another brutal, counterintuitive truth about raising this capital.
Right.
Never raise money when you are desperate. Raise it when you look like you don't need it.
Leverage is everything in a negotiation. If you go to a VC when you have 3 weeks of cash left in the bank and a broken product, they will either reject you or they will offer you terrible terms and take half your company.
Right.
But if you walk into the room with a mathematically proven engine that is already generating revenue and growing organically, you technically don't need their money to survive. You just need their money to go faster. Because you don't need them to survive, you dictate the valuation and the terms on the term sheet, which is step 68 of the checklist.
You maintain your internal locus of control. And step 70 is the culmination of this phase. Deploying that newly raised capital strategically into high-leverage growth channels with measurable ROI. You have the millions in the bank. Now you have to execute the expansion.
Yeah, you have to actually do what you said you would do.
Okay, so the wire just hit your corporate bank account. The Series A round is closed. The press release goes out on TechCrunch. It is incredibly tempting for a founder to pop the champagne, buy a nice car, and feel like they've won the game. But the text provides a sobering reality check from the global angel network. Funding is a milestone, not a destination. The real work begins the day the wire hits your bank account.
The expectations on the founder just multiplied exponentially. You went from being accountable only to yourself to being legally and fiscally responsible to institutional stakeholders who expect a 10x return on their millions.
Welcome to phases 8 and 9, strategic expansion, governance, culture, and resilience, steps 71 through 90.
Steps 71 through 80 deal with strategic expansion and market dominance. You are deploying that VC rocket fuel to identify adjacent market segments or expand into new geographic territories. You are heavily scaling your digital and physical marketing channels. You are building strategic integration partnerships with other massive tech platforms.
And technically, you are overhauling everything. You have to upgrade your data security compliance and rebuild your server architecture so it doesn't melt down when you go from 10,000 concurrent users to 1 million. Furthermore, operationally, the founder is completely removed from the front lines. You are transitioning to an entirely autonomous sales and marketing engine. You aren't doing the selling. You are managing the executives who manage the directors who manage the systems that do the selling.
The framework uses some legendary case studies to illustrate what brilliant strategic expansion looks like. Let's look at Uber. When Uber had the capital to expand globally, they didn't just turn on the app in 50 countries simultaneously, blast some generic ads, and hope for the best.
Which is what a lot of failed startups try to do.
Uber's expansion was a masterclass in localized brute force operations. They expanded city by city using highly localized launch playbooks. They knew that a rideshare app is useless without liquidity. You need drivers waiting before passengers will open the app, and you need passengers requesting rides before drivers will sign up. It's a classic chicken and egg bottleneck.
So how do they deploy the capital to solve it?
They deployed their VC funding as massive localized subsidies. They would enter a specific city, like Chicago or London, and guarantee drivers a high hourly wage even if they didn't get any rides. They heavily subsidized the cost of the rides for early passengers. They mathematically brute forced the creation of local liquidity, taking a massive loss on every ride until the market tipped and became self-sustaining. Then, they took that exact operational playbook and deployed it in the next city. They poured capital into a proven distribution system.
Airbnb is another fascinating example of solving an expansion bottleneck with capital. They had a working platform, but they needed to scale internationally. And they realized their biggest friction point wasn't technology, it was human trust.
Right. The behavioral leap required to sleep in a stranger's spare bedroom in Paris, based on a dark, blurry photo taken on an early generation flip phone, was too massive for the mainstream consumer. Trust was the bottleneck capping their TAM.
So Airbnb meticulously standardized host photography. They used their funding to hire hundreds of professional freelance photographers in major launch cities like New York and Paris. They sent these professionals to hosts' apartments for free to take beautiful, well-lit, inviting photos of the properties. By artificially elevating the visual quality of the platform, they built the localized trust loops required to capture massive international market share.
And then you have a company like Shopify, which approached expansion from an entirely different angle. Instead of trying to build every single e-commerce feature their merchants could ever possibly want, which would require an impossibly large internal engineering team, they built an open API app store. They created a developer ecosystem.
They let other people do the work.
They empowered third-party software companies to build specialized inventory or marketing tools on top of the Shopify platform. They crowdsourced their feature development, creating massive distribution leverage. They built the core infrastructure that an entire ecosystem of other businesses relied upon to survive.
Now, while orchestrating this global expansion is the exciting part, Phases 8 and 9 also demand focus on the deeply unglamorous but absolutely vital steps of survival: governance, culture, and resilience. Steps 81 through 90.
This is where rapidly scaling companies quietly rot from the inside out. As you cross the threshold of 100 or 200 employees, you can no longer manage by walking around the office. You have to formalize your board of directors and hold rigorous, legally compliant quarterly meetings. You must navigate a labyrinth of tax codes, labor laws, and data privacy regulations across all your new international operating regions.
If we connect this to the bigger picture we discussed earlier, it reinforces Dr. Gupta's assertion that governance is not a bureaucratic burden, it is structural armor. If you aggressively expand into Europe without dedicating resources to GDPR data compliance, your scale will be violently interrupted by a $100 million lawsuit.
Precisely. The masterclass highlights a critical scaling axiom here. Scale reveals every latent flaw in your organization, your code base, and your leadership. Scale does not fix problems, it acts as a magnifying glass.
Oh, that makes sense.
If your co-founders had a slight, polite disagreement about product direction when you were a team of 5, that misalignment will metastasize into a toxic factional cultural war when you are a team of 500. If your server database had a slight inefficiency early on, it will crash entirely when hit with enterprise-level transaction volume.
Which is why Step 90 is arguably the most profoundly difficult psychological test for a mature founder. Step 90 is protect your decision capital by saying no to distracting, unaligned opportunities.
Because at this stage, success breeds infinite distraction. When you have momentum and capital, everyone wants a piece of your time. You will be inundated with offers for joint ventures, media appearances, speaking gigs, and suggestions to launch adjacent product lines. If you say yes to the noise, you dilute your focus and starve the core profit engine.
You have to maintain that internal locus of control against the seduction of success. And the text stresses that founders must maintain this mental resilience, particularly when the macro environment turns against them. Because it always does. The conditions will shift. A global pandemic hits, the central bank spikes interest rates, drying up venture capital, or geopolitical conflicts disrupt your global supply chain. You have to be able to adapt the business model rapidly without panicking.
Dr. Gupta makes a powerful point regarding resilience. A startup ultimately only fails when the founder makes the psychological decision to surrender. He advises founders to treat every macroeconomic crisis not as a tragedy, but as a temporary engineering variable. You don't panic, you engineer a solution. You conduct immediate, ruthless financial audits, you cut low-leverage burn rate, you extend your cash runway, and you steer the ship. You fiercely protect your cognitive decision capital so you can see the chessboard clearly while everyone else is panicking.
It is a marathon of mental endurance. But if you maintain that discipline, if you protect your decision capital, engineer your way around macroeconomic variables, and scale the engine successfully across borders, you finally arrive at the horizon.
The finish line.
We have reached Phase 10. Legacy on the horizon, steps 91 to 105. This covers institutional maturity, mergers and acquisitions, and the IPO execution. What happens when the biological entity, this volatile, fragile infant you birthed 10 years ago, finally outgrows its creator and becomes an institution?
The startup ceases to be a startup. It transforms into a permanent pillar of the economy.
To understand the sheer scale we are discussing at this horizon, the framework outlines the valuation hierarchy used in the global venture ecosystem. It uses this mythical creature terminology based on private market worth. Early on, as you prove the engine, you might be a minicorn, a startup valued over $1 million, showing strong initial revenue growth. As you scale, you become a soonicorn, a company growing so rapidly it has the potential to cross the billion-dollar mark.
And then you cross that major psychological and financial threshold to become a unicorn, a privately held startup valued at over $1 billion. Coined by venture capitalist Aileen Lee, unicorns represent the rare, high-growth outliers that have successfully navigated the entire sequence of scale. But the hierarchy doesn't stop there.
No, if the engine is truly global, it scales into the stratosphere. You have decacorns valued at over $10 billion. These are mature, dominant market leaders with massive international moats. Then hectocorns, valued over $100 billion. And finally, the apex predator of the ecosystem, the kilocorn, valued at $1 trillion or more. These are the mega-cap tech giants, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Amazons, that originated decades ago as highly uncertain startups in a garage and now dictate global commerce.
Reaching those upper echelons requires executing the final steps of this checklist flawlessly. Steps 91 through 100 focus on scaling annual recurring revenue, or ARR, to the massive thresholds required by institutional public markets. It is about professionalizing your entire corporate structure. You have to upgrade your accounting, your auditing, and your financial reporting standards to a level acceptable to Wall Street investment banks and the SEC.
You are building deep relationships with those investment bankers, exploring strategic acquirers, and negotiating with late-stage private equity funds. And crucially, the founder and the board are constantly evaluating inbound acquisition offers against the company's long-term standalone potential. Do you accept a $2 billion cash offer to sell the company to a legacy corporation, or do you take the massive risk and take the company public yourself?
If the board decides to target an initial public offering, an IPO, you have to transition your governance structures entirely for public market compliance. You have to clean up the cap tables one last time, resolving any lingering legacy equity disputes from the early days. And very often, this is the phase where founders recognize their own biological limitations. They bring in seasoned corporate industry veterans to strengthen or even replace the executive leadership team. The visionary founder who hacked the MVP together in year one might willingly step aside from the CEO role to let a veteran corporate operator guide the highly regulated public entity.
Because the chaotic, reality-bending skills required to take a company from 0 to 1 in extreme uncertainty are entirely different from the risk-mitigating bureaucratic skills required to manage a heavily regulated 10,000-employee public corporation. Step 103 is executing your final strategic liquidity event. Whether that is ringing the bell at the IPO, signing the papers for a massive acquisition, or transitioning to sustainable private compounding, you have achieved the exit. You have, by all societal metrics, won the game.
But the master checklist of the ecosystem doesn't end at the liquidity event. The architecture of scale does not end with the founder getting rich, buying an island, and disappearing.
No, it doesn't. And I think this is the most beautiful part of the entire framework. Steps 104 and 105 bring the biological life cycle full circle. Step 104 is mentor the next generation of founders within your global business ecosystem. And step 105 is reinvest your capital and your hard-won wisdom into early-stage entrepreneurship as an angel investor.
This is the legacy phase of the biological analogy. The venture has reached full maturity, the adult has consolidated wealth and established a legacy. Now, their biological imperative is to mentor the next generation. The founder who just exited their unicorn becomes the external care, the parent, for the next wave of vulnerable infants in the idea phase.
You take the millions you made and you become the angel investor that funds the next Drew Houston making a Dropbox video, or the next Nick Swinmurn buying shoes at the mall. This connects directly back to Dr. Gupta's core motivation, his North Star mission that underpins this entire 100-step architecture. His stated goal isn't just to help a few tech bros generate massive personal wealth. It is to create 1 million jobs globally through sustainable, sequence-respecting entrepreneurship.
He notes in the text that employment dignity is what transforms communities from the ground up. By completing the 100 steps, achieving maturity, and then purposefully reinvesting your capital and your strategic wisdom back into the ecosystem, into democratic platforms like Startplanes, you are accelerating the success rate of the next generation of innovators. You are lowering the friction for the founders coming up behind you. You are building a self-sustaining orchard that feeds the global ecosystem for generations.
Stop selling the seed. Start planting the orchard. It is a profoundly cyclical vision of how human commerce should operate.
It really is.
Well, we have covered an immense, almost overwhelming amount of ground today. We have traced the massive 100-step journey of a venture-scale startup. We started in the murky diagnostic landscape of an idea, totally vulnerable and dependent on a founder's sweat equity. We forged legal armor, and we navigated the treacherous graveyard of assumptions during the validation toddlerhood.
Yep, the hardest part.
We learned the brutal math of CAC and LTV to build a repeatable commercial profit engine. And finally, we explored the strategic deployment of venture capital rocket fuel to scale that engine globally, eventually transforming it into a legacy institution that feeds the next generation.
It is a formidable 25,000-hour journey. But as the masterclass proves, it is a mathematically and operationally navigable one, provided you adhere to the architecture of scale.
So what does this all mean for you? The most crucial takeaway from everything we've unpacked today is that the physical and strategic laws of business execution remain absolute, regardless of who you are. Whether you are a teenager hacking together a project on your laptop after school, or a seasoned corporate executive sitting in a corner office planning your next move, you cannot bypass the biological rhythm of creation. You cannot force a toddler to run a marathon. You cannot build the penthouse before you pour the concrete foundation. You must respect the sequence.
The market rewards disciplined execution, not grand intentions.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive into the 100 Steps Master Checklist, I want to leave you with something to consider regarding how you operate in your own daily life, even if you aren't building a tech startup. We spent a lot of time today exploring the concept of protecting your decision capital, that precious, finite cognitive energy you use to make high-leverage choices.
You don't have to be building a billion-dollar unicorn to apply this fundamental principle to your reality. Look at your own life right now. Pull up your calendar for tomorrow morning. Look at the meetings you have scheduled, the tasks you have assigned yourself. Are you spending your precious, limited decision capital on high-leverage actions that compound over time? Are you planting an orchard that will eventually feed you and your family forever? Or are you trapped in a cycle of low-leverage busy work, desperately trying to sell today's seed just to survive the week?
That's a great question to end on. Are you staring at a murky landscape, mistaking a flurry of exhausting movement for actual momentum? Or do you finally have the clear X-ray showing exactly where you need to start pouring your foundation?